Welcome folks to my predictions for FIFA Men's World Cup Qatar 2022 Group B. I'll give my analysis on the four teams and make a prediction as to which two teams will go through. Probably the most exciting group for the neutrals, this one. England, USA, Iran and Wales. Every match an absolute event. Let's get into it and we'll look at each of the four teams. The seeded team in Group B is, of course, England. And here's a spot quiz for the viewers. Which team won the World Cup in 1938? 1954? 1974? 1966? Yeah, it was, of course, England. A year which is etched in the memory of every English sporting fan and something they constantly remind the rest of us about. And the question going into this tournament, will England bring it home at last, ending 56 years of hurt? That number being updated with each passing tournament. They were beaten semi-finalists in 2018. Gareth Southgate's men, the best English performance in a generation. And Gareth Southgate is reprising his role as national team manager for this tournament that he had in 2018. 6 years at the helm in total. Pretty good period for English football. Be that as it may, no sooner was the English squad announced, there were howls of protest across the land at the omissions and some of the inclusions as well. Ivan Toney, James Ward-Prowse, Harvey Barnes, Tammy Abraham, not being included. However, I think it's probably indicative of the riches at England's disposal that there can be so much controversy with who has made it and who hasn't. Harry Kane, of course, is on top form and will lead the team. Phil Foden having a good year with Manchester City. Kieran Trippier on the top of his game with the Magpies, and Declan Rice a shining light in an otherwise fairly dismal West Ham lineup. So plenty of good players in form. A couple of members of the squad not getting much game time this season. That is something of a concern. Another concern for England form-wise, no wins in the last six. They lost to non-qualifiers Italy, lost twice to Hungary, including a 4-0 thrashing back in June. But we don't really want to talk about that. All that said, it's a fresh slate. Each World Cup group starts with 4 teams on 0 points, and England have the experience and the talent to get through the group. Or do they? Will they finish top? Will they go through? Let's see. My predictions later in the video. On to Wales, and if you thought 56 years of hurt for England was a long time, spare a thought for the Welsh fans. They've been waiting 64 years since their last appearance on the big stage. Their only other previous appearance actually in 1958 when they lost in the quarters to Brazil. Second appearance. Wales are chomping at the bit, and I think of the 31 other teams in the tournament, no one is going into it with as much anticipation as the Welsh fans. They qualified through the playoffs, knocking out the Ukraine earlier in the year. They have lost 4 of their last 5 fixtures since in a pretty tough Nations League group. They're led by Gareth Bale, captain, talisman, striker, set-piece taker, really a symbol for the Welsh team, and he'll be ably supported by a smattering of Premier League regulars, and probably notably in my book, Nottingham Forest striker Brennan Johnson. I think he's a top prospect and he'll be a key player for Wales. One possible negative point is that half the Welsh squad ply their trade in the lower leagues in English football, and I do have a couple of question marks over their strength in depth, which could become apparent in the later group games. Their key game is first up against the USA. Both teams will be looking at that fixture as winnable and key to progressing to the round of 16. Can Wales go through? How will they fare? My predictions a little bit later in the video. On to Iran, and a proud footballing nation with a long history in the tournament. This is their 6th appearance, yet to progress beyond the group stage in any of their previous 5 appearances. with their best run out probably last time in 2018, where they finished third in their group behind Spain and Portugal, narrowly missing progression by just a solitary point. Which brings us to 2022, and it was a pretty uneventful qualification for Iran. They topped their group in Asia, which included South Korea. Pretty dominant and comfortable all the way through. Some question marks, though, hanging over the form of their European-based stars. Some indifferent results and irregular game time. We have Mehdi Taremi banging in the goals for Porto. He's probably going to be very important in attack. Sadar Azmoun, now with Bayer Leverkusen, but hasn't played since October. Some injury doubts there, but he's supposed to be fully fit for their first game against England. In addition, Brighton discard Alireza Jahanbakhsh still kicking around with the national side, and he'll be key as well. Interesting that the most influential players in the Iranian side, all attackers, it'll be interesting to see if that does affect their tactics. We thought Iran would have more of an attacking focus in the last World Cup, but they were very timid until the final group game. Same manager, Carlos Queiroz, is back for another stint as Iran manager after a brief 1 or 2 years away, 2019-2020. He's back in the role. We'll see how the tactics change for Iran and see if they go for it a bit more. If they needed any more motivation, if you look at the group they're in, they're facing England first up and then games against Wales and the United States. Who could forget 1998 2-1, Iran beating the USA, one of the most memorable group games of all time. We'll see if they can get a repeat and do that again. Huge group, some massive games. How will Iran do? I'd love to see Iran go through. I'd love to see them do well. They'll be very interesting to watch, and my predictions a little bit later. And on to the USA, and welcome back to the World Cup for the USA. They missed qualification in 2018, back on deck in 2022. It certainly says a lot for how far football in America has come when we consider that qualifying in 1990 was a huge shock. Missing qualification in 2018 was just as big a shock. In any event, it's good to have them back, and they'll want to put on a good show, especially considering they're hosting in 2026, just 4 years away. It was a pretty comfortable qualification process for the USA in the end. They finished third in CONCACAF qualifying behind Canada and Mexico, securing qualification with a 5-1 demolition of Panama in the penultimate qualifier. That was the team that qualified at their expense in 2018. So a very emphatic win there for the USA to get into the World Cup. Some pretty indifferent, scratchy form since then, though. Draws with Saudi Arabia, El Salvador, and Uruguay too. A 2-0 loss to Japan, and a 5-0 win over Grenada, though I don't know how much exactly to read into that. USA have a pretty good mix of MLS stalwarts and European-based stars. They play with confidence and pace. They're good on set pieces. I think they're a very handy side. Fans of the Premier League will be familiar with Christian Pulisic from Chelsea, the very impressive Brendan Aronson from Leeds United, Tim Ream, the veteran Fulham defender, and a shout out to Josh Sargent, the Norwich striker. Very underrated. I think he's a decent player. He'll be important for the USA too. How will they do? Well, they're facing Wales first up. That game was absolutely key. They need to get something out of that. After that, they'll be facing a very, very motivated Iran side and an England team feeling, I would suggest, rather bullish against the USA. So we'll see how America does. I think they're a very decent side, and they have a very good chance of progressing. My predictions a bit later in the video. Well, a bit later has arrived very quickly, and here we are with the final predictions. After looking at all the four teams, I'm going to go for England to top the group. And for number two, very difficult choice, and I probably won't be allowed into one particular country ever again after this, one that starts with W, and I'm going for the USA to finish in second spot. Well, that just about does it. Good luck to all the teams in Group B, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.